believe you're the best choice for the job of Milwaukee County Sheriff?
Well, I feel that I have the values that Milwaukee County voters need for the next Milwaukee County Sheriff. Thomas, you know my story. Born in the Hillside Housing Project, a graduate of Milwaukee Public School System. As a young boy growing up here in the central city of Milwaukee, was impacted by an encounter with a police officer that taught me the awesome authority and power that police officers have. And it was as a result of that encounter that I chose to enter into the profession of law enforcement. I've had a wonderful 25-year career in the Milwaukee Police Department that led to me joining Major League Baseball, which for the past 16 years I've had the opportunity to travel around the country and travel around the world, ensuring the safety and integrity of Major League Baseball. I feel that at this moment, Thomas, my skills, my judgment, my leadership learned from my years of experience working with law enforcement professionals here in the United States and around the world make me the right choice and the best choice to become the next Milwaukee County Sheriff.
What would you do? Well, let me ask you this question. Why is the Sheriff's Department, a lot of people don't really get what the Sheriff's Department really does. You know, they just see basically on the freeways and the highway system, or freeway system, patrolling and stopping people or assisting them if they need help. What makes this department so important, particularly from a law enforcement and a community perspective?
Well, in my years of law enforcement, the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office always was that organization that was the organization that collaborated with the 19 municipalities in Milwaukee County to make Milwaukee County safe. And for years, the Sheriff's Office and the Sheriff's Department took that responsibility and adhered to it, and certainly the 19 municipalities responded to them very well. I think what we've seen over the last several years, the administration, there's just not been that collaboration and cooperation on the part of the Sheriff's Office. But I think the Sheriff's Office ought to be the lead agency in terms of developing law enforcement strategy to deal with issues that now, Thomas, you've been in this community for years, know that issues just don't remain in one community, whether it's stolen vehicles, whether it's the opioid addiction problem we have. They're just not in one community, they're in every community. And so we need a sheriff and a sheriff's department that works with all 19 municipalities and that helps keep Milwaukee County safe. And I feel that right now the leadership has not been doing that.
What would you do as it relates to, that's one of my other questions, what would you do as it relates to improving community police relations or doing a more impactful job as it relates to, such as the human trafficking situation in the city, which, and according to some reports, you know, Milwaukee seems to be the mecca for it. Plus, you mentioned the opioid crisis that's occurring here in the city and the county. What would you do to address those two issues?
Well, you asked about police-community relations. And again, like I say, as somebody that has been on one side of the equation where, as a young boy, being accused of stealing a woman's purse, and at the time I was going to the grocery store, Thomas, as a young boy, couldn't have been no more than 12 or 13, and the officer made the accusation that I had stolen a purse. I said, no, sir, I got a note, $20, going to a grocery store. And he said, well, I'm going to run you over and have this woman identify you. And I said, sir, you can do that. But if she doesn't identify me, you're going to run me back over here to this grocery store and help me get these groceries home, because grandma's going to be really upset if I don't get these groceries home. But the point in that is, Thomas, is that there always was a trust in my generation of law enforcement. And conversely, that officer knew then that I was not involved in any type of activity, and thus he just drove off. Years later, that officer and I became friends. He and his brother and I continued on up the ranks of the police department, and still to this very day, Thomas, maintain a relationship. But I feel it's important that the sheriff set an example of being willing to reach across any divide, whether it's race, whether it's religion, whether it's age, whether it's gender, no matter what. And the sheriff must be willing to work with community groups, community-based organizations on any number of issues that confront our community, whether it be the issue of the opioid addiction problem we have in our community. We've got to work with the medical profession, we've got to work with the criminal justice system to abate that problem. Whether it be the human sex trafficking issue that we have in our community. There's organizations out there, many of them you know very well, Human Trafficking Task Force, led by Dana World Patterson. Outstanding organization doing some great work in this community. And again, I want to partner with them and any organization that wants to try to make Milwaukee County strong and safe. That's the goal and the commitment of me as the next sheriff.
How would you improve, well, we talked about police community rights, but you noted on your website you would partner with community stakeholders to address the issues facing our community. Mm-hmm. How would you do that?
Well, again, it begins with personal relationships. Thomas, I feel that I'm somebody that has a track record of being, again, willing to reach across any divide. My track record in the police department was one, you recall, as the public information officer in the police department, I had to keep this community advised and apprised of the activities of its police officers. Did that for 7 years, and I think did a fairly good job. Went on to oversee police district, the 3rd district up on the west side of Milwaukee. 120,000 residents, 250 officers or so. We had affluent areas in the district. We had more economically challenged issues. It was my responsibility as the commanding officer of that district to bring all those groups together, to work on problems, to make everyone understand that we can't do this without working together. And again, we collaborated on a number of issues, whether it was down in the Marquette area, whether it was in the Metcalf Park area, whether it was in the Washington Heights area, but we worked collaboratively and did an outstanding job of reducing crime, getting people out of their neighborhoods and working all across the district to improve safety and make our community strong. And again, it's that type of collaboration and work that is necessary and needed here in Milwaukee County.
Going back to a question I asked earlier about why should people care about Milwaukee County Sheriff's Department? And we might have covered it in the previous answer, but still they just see it as, you know, officers who, you know, patrol the parks, the lakefront, and, you know, the highway system. Why should this department be, you know, I guess some would think why it should be in existence, especially since the county is facing such tough economic or financial constraints?
Well, first off, the sheriff is a constitutional officer in the state of Wisconsin, so, and holds the title of being the highest law enforcement officer in the county. Thus, the sheriff and the sheriff's office ought to take its rightful role as being a leader in addressing the problems in our community, whether it be problems in our parks, problems in our highways, problem in our courts, in our jail, and in our airport. Those were are the core duties and responsibilities of the sheriff's office. But again, I grew up in an era where the sheriff's department did an effective job of collaborating with the 19 municipalities to develop drug task force, high crime, violent crime task force, and the like. And again, that has not been happening over the course of the last 10 or 15 years with the administration at the sheriff's office. So, to your question very succinctly, it's important to reestablish that collaboration, that partnership that was so effective in my time here in day-to-day law enforcement, to reestablish and reassert that leadership that the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office once held.
So you mentioned about the budget being tight for the county, and especially given the lawsuits that have taken place. What would you do to, I guess, ease the financial constraints on the sheriff's department?
It certainly has been a problem over the course of the years, with the sheriff's office. Not only a $7 million hole in the budget, but also costly litigation that has led to loss of taxpayer dollars as well. We've got to look at staffing issues at the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office first, and create staffing that is fair not only to the workers at the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office, but also that establishes, again, balanced budgets that addresses the needs of the service without expending a great deal of overtime. Certainly overtime is something that's part and parcel of public service, but again, we've got to look at staffing, and not only staffing, but the working hours of each deputy, and again, address those problems. Also, again, we've got to look at the waste, the mismanagement. Are we addressing our core functions and not doing missions that are not the core value of the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office? And then we've got to look at generating new revenue streams. And by that I mean we've got to look at ways that we can drive revenue into the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office, and particularly into Milwaukee County, so that again some of the services that we're providing, that we're getting resources back to the county. So I've got a plan and a vision for how we can address some of the problems, and again, I'm ready to go to work on day one to implement those plans.
Yeah, you mentioned the staff. You list also on your website that workers' rights, that you would promote safety, fairness, and a sense of community in the sheriff's office. Why is that important?
Well, I feel it's important that, again, if we're going to exact the highest level of service from our public servants and elected officials, they too must be treated with dignity and respect. So it's important for me, growing up in a family from a labor, my dad was involved in the labor movement for many years here in Milwaukee County, and still to this day lives and breathes labor. It's important that we treat workers with dignity and respect, so that they in turn are delivering the high level of service that we as Milwaukee County residents and Milwaukee County taxpayers expect and deserve. And again, if they're not being treated fair and with respect, again, we can expect that level of service to fall off. So again, I'm going to have a relationship with the deputies and with the Deputies Association, with the correctional officers and their bargaining units, and any and everyone that works for the employee, under the employee of the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office. I'm going to ensure that we set a high standard and that we all live up to that high standard.
The Sheriff's Department doesn't do the type of impactful work, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the Milwaukee Police Department does. You don't hear about arrests that the county sheriff deputies do on the streets. How can the department impact on day-to-day crime and crime reduction?
Well, you asked a fair question, but I think, yeah, we have and can and will, under my leadership, make an impact, because we can use the technology that's available to us, Thomas, whether it's our partnership with the federal and state law enforcement agencies, and provide that information to the 19 municipalities so that they can impact crime in their communities. That's one way that we can be a more effective partner here. But again, whether it's task force or whether it's, again, mission driven by the sheriff's office itself, there's a number of ways that we can impact crime in this community that for a number of years now has not been taking place. And again, my experience both in working in the Milwaukee Police Department, and certainly my years now, 16 years working around the country and around the world with law enforcement agencies. Thomas, when I pick up the phone tomorrow and call the sheriff in Las Vegas, Clark County, or Maricopa County, Arizona, or in Hillsborough County, Florida, it won't be the first time. These are individuals that I work with on a number of issues to keep the game of baseball safe. So again, learning from others' experiences and bringing those experiences back here to Milwaukee County, and we can, again, take our rightful place in being the lead agency in impacting crime in our community.
So you see your experience as head of security for Major League Baseball being beneficial to what you're going to be doing if you're elected sheriff?
Oh, by all means. for a young boy from the central city of Milwaukee, Thomas, to have had the benefit and the experience of traveling around the country and around the world, partnering with law enforcement agencies, governmental agencies, to put on a game to ensure the safety and integrity of 75 million fans at the major league level, 40 million fans at the minor league level, ensuring that issues of gambling, domestic violence, all of those things, anything that requires the social baseball adhering to its social responsibility, we've had the honor, and I've had the personal honor for the last 16 plus years of being engaged and involved in those activities. And yes, whether it's working with the Secret Service, whether it's working with the FBI, whether it's working with the Department of Defense on weather-related issues, or FEMA on weather-related issues, yes, all of those experiences, I think, play a major part in what the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office can and will do in the future.
Let's see, one more question. Would you bring a different esprit de corps, I guess, compared to what the previous sheriff, David Clark, brought?
Certainly, by all means. One thing we truly believe in baseball is that we're held to a higher standard, and we feel we ought to be proud of that. And so whether we're conducting ourselves on the field or whether it's our young men in the community, we're all held to a high standard. We're being in the public, people are watching us, and yes, we ought to conduct and comport ourselves on a high level. I feel that the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office certainly must get back to restoring the trust that has been lost over the course of the last administration, reaching out to the community, working with the community, helping solve some of the problems that we alluded to earlier, human sex trafficking, the opioid addiction problem, problem with hopelessness. I feel that if a young boy or girl can look to Earnell Lucas and say he went from being born in the Hillside Housing Project to a product of the Milwaukee Public School System, went on to become a commanding officer in the police department, and went on to oversee security at baseball, then maybe I too can aspire to do those very same things. So yes, I want to be the next Milwaukee County Sheriff so I can inspire some hope in some young people who can, like me, aspire to do the best and be their very best.
Earnell Lucas, candidate for Milwaukee County Sheriff, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.